Welcome, everyone, to a very special Cynical Centrist podcast for June 25th, 2019. I am the Cynical Centrist. I'm going to go ahead and just call this one episode number 5. I know that I normally do episodic podcasts on a Saturday, but I thought I'd give Tuesday one shot, mainly because I had originally planned this entire episode to just be a single segment at first. But after reading up and doing some research, the notes kind of grew to making this a whole episode, and that is on who and why and the pros and cons of my choice for President of the United States. Now, this will change as candidates drop out of the running and our choices get thinner, but as of right now, there are 24 candidates actively running for president. 24, my goodness. With another 1 or 2 expected to make their decision at any time. Now, 20 of them have made it to the June debates, so you'll be seeing them tomorrow and Thursday. And of course, I went on Twitter, and every couple of weeks or so, I posted my top 5 candidates that I personally would be voting for the Democrat nominee right now. And instead of doing this in a tweet, I thought that I could start off the show today with that top 5. Numbers 2 through 5 are honorable mentions, and of course the number 1 pick is what I will be talking about for most of this episode. I'm going to talk about why that person is my number 1 pick, the pros and cons, and other, afterward stuff as well following that. You'll see what I mean when we get to that point. What the future holds for that candidate, pretty much. Now, before I begin, and preparing the angry mobs, I'm just going to let you know that you all realize, no matter what, I know most of you are not going to vote for Trump, so you're going to end up voting for the winner of the Democratic nomination. At least most of the people who listen to this anyway. Even if it's Joe Biden. Even if it's Marianne Williamson, whom people have been talking about over the last week because of comments she made that mandatory vaccines are draconian. Even if it's John Hickenlooper or John Delaney, who got booed out of the California Democratic Convention by saying respectively that Medicare for all is bad policy and socialism doesn't work. Yeah, that was going to go great with a California Democratic crowd, guys. Hey everyone, this is a Cynical Centrist post-recording, and I have to interrupt the podcast to say that originally, when I started this top 5, I had Pete Buttigieg in as number 5. Now, why I'm spoiling this to you is because he is no longer in my top 5, but I wanted to keep it here because I wanted to mention how the idea of a religious left is noble and bold, but short-sighted in my opinion. However, literally immediately after my recording, I got this tweet, a new article from the LA Times, reporting that Mayor Pete is under fire for pulling a mayor butt and having a fried chicken lunch with Al Sharpton in Harlem. Oh my God, talking about trying to be racially insensitive, I swear. I tried to keep him from calling him Mayor Butt, despite his naive and dumb political strategies, like I mentioned regarding the religious left. But this one, I gotta say, he pulled a mayor butt. So, Pete Buttigieg, off my top 5, and I have replaced him at the moment with Kamala Harris for more of strategic reasons. Basically, the smart money would be with her if Joe Biden ever drops out. She's sort of that great compromise of all Democrat candidates that I feel, and yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's honestly the only reason I have her in my top 5 now. Another possibility for number 5, I put Marianne Williamson there because, honestly, I do admire her passion, even though there are a couple things about her I'm just like, I'm not quite sure about. But, yeah, that will almost very certainly change after I find a new number 5 I like. I will put that on the Twitter board. But for now, yeah, we'll go with that. All right, so at this point, ignore the next, 2 minutes, unless you really want to get into detail why I think the religious left is just a dumb idea, or at least pushing the religious left is just a dumb idea. Because it's just going to be a repeat of what I used to think about Mayor Pete. Damn it, bud. So let's get started with our top 5. At number 5, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. I actually had this guy much higher on the list earlier, but then I looked up some of his policies and realized I don't quite jive with them. I still do have him on the list in the top 5. Now, I got a lot of flack from listeners in the past as to why I put this guy, even at the top 3. At one time, he was my number 2. The fascination, a lot of people are wondering, what do I have with him as my fascination? It's honestly his wanting to rebrand Christianity for the left, creating a religious left, and push a healthier message that the church is not as, scary or authoritarian as the religious right would like us to believe. I would like to see Christianity being seen as something other than I had described back on my June 8th podcast as a religion of rules and double standards, where the ones evangelicals don't like go to hell for breathing the wrong way, or heaven forbid, vote against a Republican, while they can commit the most horrific of crimes and still be forgiven. And while I have stated previously that I think Mayor Pete is an absolute goddamned fool, I have to admit, I gotta show respect for what he's trying to do. And if we're going to put a religious candidate in the presidency, I'd rather it be someone like Mayor Pete, even if he is a bit more of a milquetoast establishment candidate than, one of the others out there who might be trying to, bring in a centrist message and just trying to bring in the same old. Bang! Sorry. All right, moving on. Number 4, Bernie Sanders. He doesn't quite have the same fire that he once did to me. Could be because of his recent rise in wealth and his increased focus to win rather than to send out a message. And he is less of an outsider this time around, at least to me, but he is still a very solid candidate. I think in 2016, he ran a very strong, organic grassroots campaign built around honesty and integrity, and that honestly brought a lot of people in. But you know what else brought him in? The fact that he was not Hillary Clinton. The fact that he didn't have any scandals or a bunch of issues regarding his past or whereabouts, that he was a guy who was honest. And even a lot of Republicans warmed up to him at the time. Hey, would you look at that, huh? Republicans and conservatives actually warming up to a socialist candidate just because he was not Hillary Clinton. And he was authentic and actually believed what he said. Now, that was in 2016, where he, and I know there was Martin O'Malley, but like 1 or 2% were voting for him. Bernie Sanders alone was seen as the not Clinton vote. Now in 2020, where Biden is the frontrunner, he is one of 23 not Biden choices. So yes, there's more choice there, and that is going to hurt him a little bit. He's trying to appease the establishment base a little more as well, while trying to appease the rising progressive movement with promises of pretty much free everything. Healthcare, college, childcare, guaranteed jobs, Green New Deal, fighting for LGBTQ, women, gun safety. It's a blueprint of what you expect the perfect progressive left candidate would be. And I feel like what made Sanders unique was that he reached out to the working class in 2016. He reached out to that blue-collar worker who might be pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, that saw Bernie as a guy who kind of understands what they were going through and their jobs being taken away by automation, and he's fighting for them. Bernie 2020 is more appeasing, I feel, to the social justice liberal, the millennial ivory tower liberal, and that's why he's fallen a bit from my list. Now, don't get me wrong, if he became the nominee, I am going to absolutely vote for this guy over Donald Trump. Well, barring some Clinton-esque scandal. But I will say that I think that he has definitely fallen from grace a little bit. And I know that that's something that a lot of people don't want to hear, especially since Bernie Sanders did do so well in 2016. But it is something to think about, and that's the reason why he's my number 4 pick. Number 3, I know this guy is not in the list of Democratic candidates, but he's just so awesome I had to add him. Vermin Supreme. Now, I know he's not a Democrat candidate, he is a libertarian candidate. But let's face it, he's not really a libertarian. Now, the reason? He had me at free pony. Free ponies, time travel, space travel, mandatory toothbrushing laws. What's not to like? This man should be emperor of the world. Hell, I'd go for that. Support the man with the boot on his head. Let's face it, you've done worse. I know I have. I actually almost wrote the guy in the general election in 2016 because both of the major candidates were just that repulsive to me for very different reasons. There were plenty of reasons to vote for Hillary or Trump, and there were plenty of reasons to not vote for Hillary or Trump, and they both pretty much hit my deal breakers, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, I don't think I have to worry about that this time as my situation is a little bit more concentrated, but I would still like to see this guy in a general election debate at the very least. Oh man, the debates he could have with President Annoying Orange. They should put that on pay-per-view. It'd be a license to print money. So anyways, Vermin Supreme, number 3. Number 2, Elizabeth Warren. Now, I flip-flop between her and Bernie for this number 2 spot when I tried to make my Vermin Supreme sandwich here. But what gives her the edge, primarily to me, is age. Bernie Sanders, if he defeats Donald Trump, will be 79 when he is inaugurated. By comparison, Donald Trump, if he gets reelected, will be 74 for his second term. Do you really want an octogenarian running our country and holding one of the most high-profile, high-stress jobs in the world? Now, this is not like Russia's president where Putin can do practically whatever the hell he wants, or some dictatorship like Kim Jong-un with North Korea. The president of the United States is the leader of the free world. He has to make deals. He has to make compromises and improve foreign relations with other countries. It's a stressful as hell job, well, for most people anyway. Elizabeth Warren would be 70 upon inauguration. Her being younger and a female, so longer life expectancy alone would give her the edge. I would also like to see a female hold office as well, especially someone as smart and talented as Elizabeth Warren, at least to me, and definitely someone who has managed to get herself back from the abyss in a way, from that terrible Native American heritage thing that she had a year ago. Talk about a comeback, huh? I also find her a bit more articulate than Bernie, a bit more willing to work across the aisle, and I know I will probably flip-flop between her and Bernie 20 times between now and when it will be time to vote. If the other candidates above them aren't still in it, well, there's only one candidate above them that isn't. But right now I have Warren at number 2. The only thing that bugs me with her is the student debt forgiveness plan that she has. I don't really want to get to why right now, but I do think while it's a good strategy in the primary, it is a bad strategy to keep that forgiveness policy up in the general election, especially when many of those voters didn't go to college or went to a lower-end college to save money, but, that's just me. And number 1, if you've seen my Twitter or the title of this show, you'd know by now, the man I'm talking about for the rest of this show, number 1, is Andrew Yang. As a matter of fact, he's probably the first candidate I have agreed with more than 2/3 of his issues on since I've been allowed to vote. As a matter of fact, I agree on close to about 90% of his issues. He is the first candidate I have ever donated to as well, so that shows you how strongly I support him. I will not say how much I've donated to him, but I have donated to him a sizable amount. A lot of what I got to learn from him, I did get from the Rubin Report, at least him on a personal note, and on that end, he sounds honestly a lot like me. He is a very resilient entrepreneur, a numbers man, not really a high society kind of person, very much an everyday kind of man, and his net worth does show that too. I mean, I checked his net worth, and I think he's just barely a millionaire right now. But I do expect his net worth to be increased like tenfold after this, regardless of if he wins or not. Policy-wise, I do invite you to go check out all of his policies on yang2020.com because I would be here for hours if I talked about each of his policies one at a time. He does have a top 3 policy list, all 3 of which, to some degree, I am either agreeing with or I'm willing to see happen. The first is universal basic income, which is $1,000 a month for every American over the age of 18, being paid with a value-added tax similar to what you see in Europe. Now, how I explain it really does not do him justice. You have to go check out his interview. Or I should say, interviews, because he has done quite a bit that many people have made landmarks on. We'll talk about that in a little bit later on. And that he found a way to do this universal basic income idea using a very non-liberal tactic, like imposing a sales tax, which is what a value-added tax is, I think would perk a lot of independents to like the man. Now, while I don't know if Yang's freedom dividend is the best idea overall, I do realize that with job automation going to replace a lot of low-skilled jobs, and even some middle and high-skilled jobs, UBI is inevitable, whether we like it or not, or the economy is going to be in serious trouble with less and less people buying stuff. A job guarantee, like Bernie wants, is just going to look anachronistic when private industry eventually uses robots to do jobs many times more efficiently than what a human can do, leaving the government even slower than it already is. So, in this case, I do admire Yang's proactiveness. Second is Medicare for all. Now, at this point, 80+% of people side with the idea of some kind of a Medicare plan. Medicare plan for everybody. As someone with Asperger's and Crohn's disease myself, taking a medicine that costs me close to $70,000 a year uninsured, I am all in on this. Encouraging early treatment now will prevent far more expensive treatments later, negotiating lower prices as well, especially if the government has some skin in the game on that. And from what I understand, he isn't going to completely push private companies out of the market. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that's true or not. Now, he does kind of go back and forth, I think, on some of that, depending on who he talks to. Probably, though, thinking through some hybrid system like Australia supposedly has, where you have basic coverage and treatment for those that can't afford it, but still allow more premium coverage through the market. Or maybe by just making the government a competitor like the U.S. Postal Service in deliveries against FedEx and UPS. Third, and this is where I kind of am very interested in, is human-centered capitalism, which is a push for new metrics as to what success is in the market. Instead of being solely profit-driven, pushing a quality-of-life-driven metric to determine the success of a business, which likely would influence people to invest in those businesses, which would bring them more profits. At least that is how it was understood to me when I was watching his interviews. Putting the focus that humans are more important than money, and in his campaign page, he does describe examples of how pure, laissez-faire capitalism, which is what Republicans push, and especially libertarians, leads to suboptimal solutions. Examples are, like, for example, an airline refusing to honor your ticket because they can get more money from a customer who purchases last minute, or a pharmaceutical company charging extortionate rates for a life-saving drug because the customers are desperate. So, of his big three, I'm 3 for 3. There are a few others that I am definitely all in on, like lowering the voting age to 16, paid family leave, especially funding autism intervention. That one's big for me. Asperger's, like I said. Fight for equal pay. That one's a little tricky to talk about, because when people think women are paid less than men, they're thinking women are paid 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. And I know there was this one video from Prager University that was showing this was not true. And if we accounted for just a man and woman doing the same job, the pay is still about 95 or 94 cents to the dollar or something, which is true, but that doesn't mean a pay gap doesn't exist. And they would go on to continue and say, well, with other choices as well, it's basically non-existent. But again, you still admitted a pay gap existed. Women are still being paid less than men. So yes, fight for equal pay, I'm with that. Also promoting vocational education. I do agree college is not for everyone. The idea for free college that Bernie and Warren are promoting sounds great, but what about trade and tech schools? What if someone wanted to be a plumber or go to an apprenticeship as a welder or maybe train to be a mechanic? Those are not jobs that you would find in college. Now, I think Elizabeth Warren did mention during a CNN town hall that she would push free tech school and free community college as well. I didn't hear anything regarding from Bernie or any of the other candidates, but for those that want the free college, yes, there's that. A few downsides I do have regarding Andrew Yang, and there are a few. Now, for one, I'm not a big fan of even recognizing really cryptocurrency as a serious currency right now, per se, because it's not really backed by anything, and that's been the big thing with the gold bugs, is that at least gold is tangible, so that's why you have value on it. Now, Andrew Yang trying to push the idea of data actually having value could change this. So I'm kind of iffy on that, but as it stands right now, I do not see how having Bitcoin as a legitimate currency or some kind of cryptocurrency as a legitimate currency is going to really help us out. Now, another big one, automatically sunsetting old laws. I think reviewing them would be a little better before sunsetting them. He also has a few climate change solutions that I'm kind of iffy on. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'm saying I'm kind of on the fence on. Especially since he's a technology guy, you would think that he would be a little bit easier on the climate change solutions, considering that technology can be out there in the future that could help out with like artificial photosynthesis and try to push out some of that carbon dioxide that's up in the atmosphere and try to bring out oxygen. But that's beside the point. Those are just a few examples, but overall, like I said, I agree with pretty close to 90% of his issues. And he's definitely the first candidate that I have seen, at least since I've been allowed to vote anyway. And if you don't think he might have a chance to win, considering he only has 1% of the vote right now, I'm going to have to remind you, in the 2016 Republican primary, Donald Trump had 1% of the vote going into the June 2015 debates. And this was before Trump eventually skyrocketed to win the nomination and later the presidency. But can Andrew Yang repeat that? Well, I'll give you my opinion on that when we get back. Before I continue, just going to give a quick shout out here to Audionautics.com for the opening song. Audionautics.com for thousands of different songs for your podcast or advertisement, completely royalty free. Audionautics.com. Also, Pulsar Radio, spinning new alternative rock, indie, punk, metal, and hardcore. New show tomorrow, 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern. Tune in at radiovegas.rocks or go to @Pulsar Smash on Twitter to scan a barcode to download the radiovegas.rocks app for free. Finally, do check me out on social media at Cynical Centrist on Twitter, and remember, if I'm not pissing you off, I'm not doing my job. So as I said at the top of the program, the guy that I plan to vote for, if he is still running by the time the primaries get to my state anyways, will be Andrew Yang. Now, I'm not going to say what state I live in. Like I said, I wish to remain anonymous, but I will say that the chances of me being able to vote for him don't look pretty good right now. And that leads me to this second segment. Now, before you think of me just being hashtag Yang Gang or secure the bag or any of that, I do try my best to remain neutral throughout the elections or the primaries for two reasons. One, I'm a podcaster, I'm an analyzer, and I'm not a fan of cheerleading. I would like to call things as far down the middle as I possibly can and as unbiased as I can, so I don't like wearing rose-colored glasses, and I never have. That's just never been me as a person. Two, I have come to this harsh truth, and I think many members of the Yang Gang, as I like to call them, and as they like to call themselves, that I've talked with don't want me to say and don't like me to say, but it has to be said. And that is the only candidate in the Democratic primary with exactly a 0% chance to win the nomination is Andrew Yang. Now, many of you will say anyone outside of the top 5 right now has like a 0% chance to win, and I'm saying no. I'm saying no matter how well he does in the debates, and no matter how much people start warming up to him, Andrew Yang is the only candidate that cannot win this race. John Hickenlooper has a better chance than him. Eric Swalwell has a better chance than him. Marianne Williamson has a better chance than him. Actually, Williamson herself could have a damn good chance if her friend Oprah ever decides to endorse her. She could be top 5 tomorrow, I'm just saying. And if you don't believe me, hey, you underestimate the eternal star power of Oprah, all right? Wayne Messam, at least for now, has a better chance than him. Until July. Now, if he doesn't make the debates in July, then I will definitely say Andrew Yang does have a better chance than he does. Or maybe about the same. To me, it's a toss-up that Andrew Yang even makes it to Iowa. But to his credit, I do feel a lot of the reason why I feel this way is not his fault, and has everything to do with the state of the Democratic Party and a fringe base that will never back this man, no matter what he does. Now let me explain why. It's a combination of many things, and there's a couple big ones in the end. First, I do want to go to Yang's issues. Now, his problems, at least to me. Now, the first big problem is that he is running his campaign like it's a general election or a jungle primary. He's reaching out to mostly big thinkers of all political ideologies, mostly coming from the center to the, I would say, center-left to maybe just barely leaning right. People who are really good at thinking outside of the box and how to fix the country. That libertarian right, or that centrist left that just hates corporations but want to come up with solutions and can't really think up of those solutions. This guy has these guys in droves, and he captivates these people. Basically, independence is what I'm saying. Now, generally, this is awesome. And in a perfect world, yeah, he should be the front runner by like a landslide at this point. Well, actually, let me scratch that. It would be between him and Warren for that nomination. The problem is, this is not a primary of ideas. I'll give you an example. Yang put out a tweet on the 13th that said we shouldn't attempt to imprison Trump because it would make us look like a third world country. Now, many independents, after looking at the reasoning on his tweet, would either agree or at least understand the reasoning. But those independents are 99% not going to be voting in the Democratic primary unless they are in an open state. Now, this isn't going to hurt him that much because he is still slightly under the radar, and Democrats themselves are a bit split on whether or not to impeach Trump, let alone imprison him. But he's probably thinking, well, if we imprison or impeach Trump, it'll make Democrats look bad, or the rest of the world would see it as something a third world country would do, and could set the stage to accuse any president of just breathing the wrong way to impeach and imprison him. Now, that's what actually the latter part he said in a tweet. But I think that if Trump were to be imprisoned, this would probably be a one-time thing. At least that's my opinion. I think this is a one-time thing. Like, Trump is just, the scandals here are just so bad that it would be very difficult to compare apples to oranges. Now, my opinion, I don't think Trump is going to get impeached or imprisoned. I do think that the chance of him being impeached go up if he gets reelected. But in a Democrat primary, you cannot say stuff like that. The left, especially the progressive left, is angry. They will chew you alive for statements like that. In order to get through this Democrat primary, at least if your name is not Joe Biden right now, you have to be vehemently anti-Trump. Heck, look at Biden. Look at how much flack he's getting for his soft rhetoric on Trump. The second problem with Andrew Yang's campaign, at least to me, is that he is marketing to the wrong crowd. He is going on the wrong shows to reach out to Democrat voters, and that I think is part of what is hurting him with a lot of the progressive base that is definitely needed if you want to win the Democrat nomination, especially the social justice progressives, the social justice warrior types, amongst other things. Now, I started a discussion on Twitter a few days ago. I had asked supporters of Andrew Yang, where did they first hear about Andrew Yang that led them to fully back the man, and why? The top answers for the first part of that question, number one with a bullet was the Joe Rogan Experience. In second place was Dave Rubin. Third was Ben Shapiro. And I think one or two said Bill Maher, Sam Harris, and the Breakfast Club. Do you see a problem here? Joe Rogan, independent, leaning conservative. Might vote Democrat if he thinks someone looks great, but I would say about 70-80% of the time is going to choose the Republican. Dave Rubin, independent, leaning conservative. Likely does not vote Democrat most of the time. Ben Shapiro, strong conservative. Definitely does not vote Democrat all of the time. And Bill Maher, and I'm going to put this in quotes, unwoke liberal, whom a lot of younger liberals do not like because he makes fun of millennials a lot, he acts smug, and honestly, in my opinion, he's probably the closest lookalike to Joe Biden we get to make us laugh other than the real deal. He is known for going on conservative and centrist talk shows. Why would you talk, let alone even promote yourself being on these talk shows in a Democrat primary? Now, general election, hey, knock yourself out. Go for it. Go nuts. You know, you're going to be facing Trump at that point, and you're going to take those votes from Trump, but guess what? You're not facing Donald Trump right now. You're facing Joe Biden. You're facing Bernie Sanders. You're facing Elizabeth Warren. You're facing 23 Democrat candidates for one spot in the Democrat nomination. Your audience is not those conservatives that watch you and think, you know what? Maybe this guy has a point. Your audience is not those independents that back you wholeheartedly and talk about Yang 2020, Yang Gang, secure the bag, No, your audience are the progressives and some of the Democrat centrists, but mostly progressives right now. That is the most informed Democrat voters would probably be in the progressive left. His tweets definitely don't help his case either. I mentioned one earlier. Well, here's another one. He talked about how poor white males get pulled into racism and bigotry because they feel like they're forgotten. And while he does seem to respond well to economic progressives, he does terribly with these social justice progressive types. Hell, I've been hearing on Twitter, a lot of people think that this guy's a right-winger in disguise. Think about that for a second. Now, this is a perfect segue to the issues with society that I think that is going to cause Andrew Yang to lose this nomination, especially from the Democratic side. Now, as I said, the Democrats are mad as hell, at least the progressive left base is. and they will be disproportionately voting in these primaries. They are not seeking new or alternative solutions to their problems. They are dead set in what they want. Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks created a progressive pledge with 5 landmark principles that every candidate that signs it must stand by. Andrew Yang did not meet those 5 and said that he would not be able to sign the pledge because he feels like his ideas technically do not go with their flow. Now, they already have candidates that meet most of these requirements and have actually already signed that progressive pledge. The big 2 in particular, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, the 2 that are closest to Joe Biden right now. And they are both ahead of him in the polls at the time of this recording. Reaching out to non-Democrats and telling them they have to register as Democrats, in most states anyway, to vote for you is a very bad political strategy, especially if your candidate does not win. Because, trust me, those guys do not want to be flooded with campaign ads for a candidate that they definitely won't be voting for 3 to 4 months afterward. The second issue with society, regarding Andrew Yang anyway, is that he does not have great appeal to a good portion of the Democratic base. And I know this sounds like repeating myself, but, like I said, one of his 3 big policies, human-centered capitalism. The key word here is capitalism. Now, if you are a thinker and you actually think about this for, I would say, a good few hours or so, and get into real deep thought, you would find that human-centered capitalism actually is a better solution than straight-up socialism, focusing on quality of life metrics instead of profit. In a way, it kind of blurs that line of capitalism and socialism, and I've talked with some economic progressives. Many of them like the idea, many of them like it as an alternative. Now, some don't like it, but overall, the reaction to the idea of human-centered capitalism, amongst economic progressives anyway, is mostly positive, or at the very least, they're open to it. The other side, social justice progressives, hate it. Also, when questioned on if we should raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, Yang answers that he would use UBI as an alternative to raising the minimum wage. Now, if you do the math, this actually does increase everyone's minimum wage by around $6 an hour, but most people won't math that and figure it out. Now, I know your campaign slogan is MATH, standing for a Make America Think Harder. But sorry, Democrats are not going to think harder for you. Capitalism, anything, is going to turn off a good portion of the Democrat base. Did you not see how badly John Hickenlooper and John Delaney got booed in California for saying Medicare for all is bad policy and socialism doesn't work? I'm telling you, these people are very set on what they want, and the closer a candidate gets to exactly what they want, no workarounds, no alternatives, no deep thought, the more they're going to crowd around that candidate. Point blank. He also does not like identity politics. I don't like it either. That's great. One problem. I'm called the cynical centrist, not the cynical leftist. Identity politics is the very reason I walked away from being a liberal leftist in 2016 following the Trump election. As I've stated, identity politics has been a cancer on the Democrat Party. Their economic progressive policies, most independents do like healthcare for all. But they'll back away when they realize political correctness is thrown into that package. And the reason they don't like it isn't because they hate equal rights like most supporters of identity politics believe. It's because most can see through the bullshit that it is an Orwellian nightmare that reshuffles the deck of who is on top and who's on bottom, or at least what they think who is on top and who is on bottom. Third issue, lack of mainstream coverage. I do find it weird how MSNBC keeps this guy out of slides where they show candidates, and they keep him out of media coverage altogether, even though they're the ones that are hosting the debates tomorrow. Now, I have a theory, and this goes back to 2016 for me because I've seen this as a personal testimony from others. And to me, this is the biggest reason why Andrew Yang will not win the nomination. And it is because I believe the Democrat Party, as they are right now, will never allow an Asian man to be their nominee. They do not see him being the first Asian man to participate in a primary as anything historic. Instead, they talk about how he panders to the alt-right, even though he doesn't. And he has multiple times rescinded their endorsements. I think it's that the far left progressive base, the social justice identity politics base, are racist against Asians. I'm just going to say it straight up. That's just my opinion. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of racism that's like the alt-right, all right? Where they yell slurs at black people and they threaten them, at least for most of them. I've seen a few that have used Asian racial slurs on friends of mine, but for most of them, that's not the racism I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a very subtle racism that is harder to detect. I refer to things like Steve Harvey's joke on how Asian men can't get dates a couple years ago, or how Tinder had an ad where a woman swiped right on everyone but the Asian guy. I'm talking about the kind of racism that Harvard has when they intentionally try to make it harder for Asians to get into their college, or for Google when they intentionally make it harder for Asians to get a job. It's subtle. You don't notice it at first. And you might notice it if you are either really into identity politics, or you have friends with a disenfranchised minority, or you are that disenfranchised minority yourself, or if the media points it out for you, but the media is creating the bias, in this case MSNBC. So obviously it's going to be very difficult to see for most people. Now, why this racial bias? In my opinion, it's because I feel like we as a society, especially our generation, the millennial generation, is the most image-centric generation in history. And I've given a few examples, just like a minute or two ago, about how Asian men, especially, but Asians in general, are just seen as different or ugly or just not like the rest of society. I even got in an argument with someone from Twitter regarding why they wouldn't vote for Andrew Yang, and they had told me it was simply because he was too ugly to be president, or he didn't look presidential, and this was coming from someone with an SJW Twitter account, and I'm not going to call them out because I don't want people to start attacking them or anything, but that is what I'm talking about here. Now, I am going to make a disclaimer here that most liberals are not like this, and I'm hoping to believe that most SJWs, I would say most SJW liberals are not like this, is what I'm hoping for. But there is a sizable amount of them that have this bias against Asians, especially Asian men, simply because of how they look, and it's because of our image-centric generation, despite being told, hey, be yourself, or, love someone for who they are. We have this very image-centric view of us. That's why in dating apps now, we have people kind of just swiping right or swiping left, and that's the last time they ever see them. So it's the exact same thing in the real world. And to be honest, I do find it a crying shame. I mean, for a generation that talks about how we need to think about what's on the inside that counts, and I don't think other generations really push that as much as our generation at least was taught. We really do look at what's on the outside more than probably any other generation in existence. So when you see this Asian man as ugly in an image-centric society, that's going to cross over to thinking like, how trustworthy is the person? Or how kind is the person? Or will the person make a great friend? Is the person a good candidate for a job? Now, usually, there are associations that can counteract this kind of discrimination against minorities. For blacks, there are Black Lives Matter, the NAACP. For Asians, there's one, the AAPI, and they usually don't talk about Asian discrimination very much unless it involves a female. And they already usually have help from feminists of some sort. So for Asian men like Andrew Yang, he's pretty much SOL. Like I said, it's not entirely the fault of social justice progressives that are like this. And if you don't believe me, hey, take a look at Hollywood for how long? Until maybe last year with Crazy Rich Asians. Hollywood don't like Asian guys for a reason. And I don't see why the news media would be any different. Now, I don't know if MSNBC in particular doesn't like him simply because he's Asian. I think that might be part of the reason. It might be some guy there just doesn't like the way he looks. There is the other possibility that MSNBC doesn't like outsiders because they did leave Marianne Williamson out, even though she also qualified for these debates. Though I think in the most recent picture they did put her in, I believe. Someone can check on that for me on Twitter. Now, she also signed that progressive pledge for one as well, so maybe being that outsider of the outsiders could have hurt her with MSNBC. I'm not sure. They left out others too, but they didn't qualify for the debates. But for all of these reasons is the reason why I feel Andrew Yang has zero chance, and I mean zero chance, not even 0 point and then a bunch of numbers at the end. I mean 0.00000% chance. A shift in the thinking of the progressive base would have to be made in order for Yang to have even a sliver of an opportunity, or, and this sounds kind of radical, Andrew Yang should turn Republican. It sucks, but it is what it is. Now, I'm going to wrap this up and try to go full circle when we get back. Okay, we are back, and now you're probably thinking to yourself, if I think Andrew Yang has zero chance, why am I voting for him? Well, other than I think he matches my views the best, honestly, I want to be wrong. Like, if there is any time that I wish I could be wrong on something, it would be this. I wish that everything I have just said in these last 37 minutes about him not having a chance is bullshit, and I hold on to a little bit of hope that my judgment is off somehow, that my judgment of the left is off somehow. Also, I do think that he has a bright future in politics, and this is kind of a stepping stone for him to get to that point. I also wanted another body for that 130,000 unique donor benchmark. That's why I had donated to him as well to get to September. I also think that in the future, especially as automation starts becoming integrated into jobs like truck drivers, pilots, taxi cab drivers, factory workers, and actually factory workers have had this for years, cashiers, and even some higher skilled jobs like computer programmers, his message to me will start becoming even more relevant. He would become the perfect candidate to me for a 2032, 2036 election, provided the media get over their subtle biases against him, or hell, by that time he might switch parties and go Republican because the Republicans do an about-face on their own racial biases. Maybe a new party comes out of nowhere either, a third party or something, not likely, but say a new party would come out of nowhere and Yang is their nominee in the general. Maybe we have, ranked choice voting or something, and then that kind of builds up like all these other parties. Either way, I do feel over time, his message will make him increasingly relevant if he wishes to stay in politics. Now, I saw someone on Twitter mention Andrew Yang as a possible VP running mate for an Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders ticket. Now, to me, I don't see that happening when Yang drops out for many reasons. One of them in particular is his ideas are just way too different. Now, there's a chance he does get into a cabinet position under a Democrat administration, but I think those chances are also a bit small. I think after Trump hired a bunch of businessmen to run his cabinet, Democrats will try to do a 180 and, in my opinion, push only insiders in. So basically anyone who is a governor, congressman, senator, maybe in the state legislature, maybe, that has some kind of experience with the departments that they're in. The vice president will likely come from the Midwest as well, so if any presidential candidate gets into a vice presidential spot, it will likely be Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg, the latter in a sort of can we take Indiana kind of battle between Buttigieg and Pence. Maybe they can do that debate in Indiana if it happens, the vice presidential debate. That would be interesting to watch. Now for Yang, he lives in New York. He could consider moving states to run for Senate, but the more localized game honestly wouldn't fit him very well. I mean, he would basically have to pull off what Hillary Clinton did back in, I want to say 02? I think it was 02. That she did with her move to New York and winning the Senate seat there. And a lot of people saying, oh, she's not a real New Yorker. You wouldn't want to do that if, say, he wanted to move to, California or something. His best shot would be to battle for a Congress position in New York in 2022, if he loses, well, I'm going to say when he loses, and use it as a stepping stone to, assuming the Democrats win, go for a pretty serious, I would say semi-serious, 2028 run down the line. Possibly try to win a Senate spot if Gillibrand or Schumer decide to leave between that time. Might also help his star power a little bit. And then, obviously, as I said, in 2028, take another shot at the presidency, with a bigger name, bigger star power, and likely the flagship message of UBI, which he calls the freedom dividend, being increasingly relevant. All right, that is a wrap, everyone. By the way, I know this is a longer episode than normal, but this is just the tip of the iceberg as to my analysis on my favorite candidate, Andrew Yang, and even just a look at how he looks from the Democrat primary in general. Now, I just told myself when I started this podcast I would have a hard cut at 45 minutes, and I am coming up on that right now. So that's the show, everyone. If you want to argue or debate more about this, come at me, bruh, at Cynical Centrist. Saturday, I'm going to be doing a review of the first debate, so I will see you then. Bye, everybody.